the trinomial. It's in descending order. No greatest common factor, no negative leading coefficient, no special product. This is a perfect square, but this is not. And 1 is not the leading coefficient. So we're down to the very last possibility, in which I'm trying to find two numbers whose product is and whose sum is. The product must be very good, and the sum must be perfect. Since the product is negative, then I'm expecting a positive and a negative. So can we find two numbers, one positive and one negative, whose sum is -1 and whose product must be -20? Very good, -5 and 4. At this point, I cannot use these numbers to factor because the leading coefficient is not 1. So I have to rewrite the problem with these two in any order you want. So positive 4x minus 5x minus 5 equal. Oh, there is no equal there. I'm sorry. Don't even look. I don't know why I wrote 0. Sorry about that. Good. So now there are 4 terms. And I will look at the first two. And I will say, oh, here I can factor. Very good. Excellent. And what is left in parentheses? Good. And now I have to copy x plus 1 in order to avoid possible mistakes. And now I look and I factor out the sign and the factor. -5 indeed. So then x plus 1 and 4x minus 5. Is this okay? Is this okay? Good. Anything else that you worked on? Other questions for me? Is there any particular topic that you would like to start with? Okay, then I will choose. Okay, so let's look on page, at the end of chapter 11, there is a chapter review. So let's start with that. And the page is 708. Problems 1 and 2 are solving by factoring. Do we still need to solve by factoring? Should we pick one of those two? Okay, very good. Let's pick 2. So we have 7a squared equals 29a plus 30. 1 minute. I'll put my attendance. Can anyone tell us the first step towards solving? 7a squared minus 29a minus 30. Perfect. Second step, anyone? It's a trinomial, it's in descending order. No greatest common factor, no negative leading coefficient. Definitely not a special product. And 1 is not the leading coefficient, so my last chance is to try to find two numbers whose product is very good and whose sum is good. So I'm expecting again a positive and a negative because the product is negative. Since this is a big number, I would take it aside. 210, I know it's 21 times 10. 21 is 3 and 7, and 10 is 2 and 5. I'll put them in ascending order. 2 times 3 times 5 times 7. So this is the prime factorization of 210. From here, I want to just imagine you're pulling them from a hat, but we need to use all factors and get two numbers. Now, because the sum is negative, this number must be much stronger in the negative sense than this one. If this number is -1, they must be very close to each other. But if this is -29, they are quite far apart, 29 apart. So expect a bigger number and a much smaller one, because their difference is 29. So I'm going to try. So they're not close. They're 6 and very good. I used all factors. It's guaranteed that the product is -210, and definitely the sum is -29. So because their difference was 29, they could not be close to each other. So that's another indication of how to group these four factors. So now I have to go back and rewrite the equation. 7a squared. In any order you like, you're going to get the same solution. 6a minus 35a minus 30 equals 0. And now from the first two, we will factor. Good. So it's 7a plus 6. I have to copy 7a plus 6, and this time I do have to copy 0 as well. And now I can look. And the answer is -5. So then I have 7a plus 6 is the common factor, and then a minus 5. Is this clear? Any questions? Of course, it's not done. I have to solve, so I have to find two solutions in A, or for A, if you want. So the first solution is very good. From here, 5. And from here, we move 6. Yes. -6 divided by 7. I would like to practice completing the square. Next. Or we need another example like this, or we can complete the square now. Okay, let's complete the square. X squared plus 3x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, 1 minute. We're asked to solve this equation by completing the square. Can anyone review the steps? Can anyone say yes, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4? For completing the square. No, this is complete the square, not factoring. Completing the square. What will be the first step? So we have to identify the middle coefficient. Then what do we do to it? Divide it by 2, 3/2. Then we square 3/2 and we get 9/4. Good. So I have to add 9/4 to both sides, and I have to move one to the other. So I will write x squared plus 3x plus 9/4 equals 9/4 minus 1. Do we all remember this step? Is this clear? Yes? Okay. So now I know what this is. I don't want to forget the testing centers require you to have an ID, any ID. They will check your ID. Exactly. Indeed, x plus 3/2, because 3/2 squared is 9/4. And the right-hand side is 5/4. Do we all agree with 5/4? 5/4. Yes? Okay. Now I complete the square, and I did not solve the problem. What do I do next? Yes, I have no choice. So how many solutions will I get? Because if I forget something very important and I only get one solution, then I'm wrong. Yes, 2 solutions. So I have x plus 3/2 equals? Yes. Remember, we are allowed to split the radical into the square root of 5 over the square root of 4, which is 2. And then, please be careful where you put 3/2. In this case, negative 3/2. It has to be between the equal symbol and the plus or minus. So then x equals negative 3/2 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. Any questions on this? Do we need another completing the square? Okay, let's make one up. Can anyone make one up for us? What if I put a 2 in front? Okay. Excellent. Very good. Okay, we are asked to complete the square on this problem, to solve the quadratic equation by completing the square. Okay. What is the very first step? Actually, mandatory step. Both sides by 2. Remember, we cannot complete the square if the leading coefficient is not 1. We have to make it 1, no matter what. Even if the coefficients are divisible by 2 or are not divisible by, bless you, we still have to make it 1, the leading coefficient 1. So then what will you write? You can, if you want, already move the 13/2 to the other side. You don't have to wait. So now, the procedure goes through the same steps right after we eliminated the leading coefficient. So, middle coefficient, 6. Divide that by 2. Square that, 9. That's what we have to add to both sides. We have to add 9 to both sides. We know what the left-hand side is. This was the first thing we looked at this semester. What does that equal to? Very good. Now the right-hand side, I have the least common denominator, which is 2, and I need to multiply 9 by 2. So I have 18 plus 13, which is 31. Now what? Yes. And we get x plus 3, but I have to write, instead of the absolute value, which would be correct, plus or minus, the square root of 31 over the square root of 2. And we know what we have to do in this situation. We cannot leave radicals in the denominator, so I have to multiply and divide by, indeed, thank you. So then x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root over 2. So I multiply these two and I get 62. And this is the final simplified form. There is nothing else we can do here. Very good. We're going to use quadratic formula in several problems, but if you want a specific problem with quadratic formula, we can choose one. Discriminant. So problems 9 through 12. Negative 8, 48, 100, and 0. We're asked to identify what happens or how many solutions, if any, will a quadratic equation have if the discriminant is negative 8, if the discriminant is 48, if the discriminant is 100, and if the discriminant is 0. So these are all the discriminant. When the discriminant is a negative number, how many solutions and what type of solutions will the quadratic equation have? Two imaginary. Very good. When the discriminant equals 48, or 100 for that matter. Very good. Distinct. Very good. Two real, distinct solutions. Perfect. When the discriminant is 0, 1. The correct answer is a double solution, but we say one real solution. Very good. Let's look at a word problem now. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. So let's look at problem 19. 19 on page 708. Cadets graduating from military school usually toss their hats high into the air at the end of the ceremony. One of them threw his hat so that the distance d of t in feet above the ground, t seconds, it was thrown, was d of t equals negative 16t squared plus 30t plus 6. Find the distance above the ground of the hat 1 second after it was thrown. We want to find the distance above the ground of the hat 1 second after it was thrown. What do we have to do? Any suggestions? Exactly. Very good. So negative 16 plus 30 plus 6. I have to replace t by 1 second. So 36 minus 16 is 20 feet. Part B. Any questions on this? Find the time it takes the head to hit the ground. So I throw my head up in the air, it reaches the maximum, and then it hits the ground. We want to determine how long it takes for the head to hit the ground. How do I think about that? What do I need to do?
So duty is 0.
Exactly. When something hits the ground, the distance from the ground must be 0. Perfect. So then we have negative 16t squared plus 30t plus 6 equals 0. I will definitely divide both sides by even negative because I don't like negative leading coefficient in anything. So 8t squared minus 15t minus 3 equals 0. Yes, say it again. I cannot. When I solve a quadratic equation, I have to have 0 on one side. So since it's not factorable, negative 24 and negative 15, I will have to use the quadratic formula. Negative b, what do I write? Perfect. Plus or minus the square root of 15 squared minus 4 from the formula times a, which is 8, times c, which is negative 3, divided by 2 times a, which is 16. I recommend, since you have a negative here and a negative here, I recommend changing them into positive. I will use the graphing calculator. So let's look at y equals. Clear whatever you have. Before we do anything, I want to draw your attention to something very important. When you put this in the graphing calculator, make sure you have parentheses around the top and parentheses inside, closed, open, closed, under the square root. Very important. Now you have probably more sophisticated calculators already, so the calculator may take some responsibility on these. I don't trust anything. So please be careful with that. So 15 plus the square root, parentheses, 15 squared plus 32 times 3. Close the parenthesis. Close the parenthesis outside and divide by 16. This is 2.06. So t equals 2.06 seconds. However, it's not done. I have to go back. Here's how I go back. Why? Because I'm lazy and I don't want to type it in again. Second and entry. It will copy everything I performed, everything I put in, and I will just go back and override the plus. Change it into a minus. That's not what I meant. Oh, of course. Okay, so then the other one is unacceptable, but I would write it negative 0.18 seconds. Time cannot be negative, so it hits the ground in 2.06 seconds, which means, so here's the person, and he does this, or he or she does this. So between the moment He throws the hat up in the air. It reaches a maximum. How do I know it reaches a maximum? Because the leading coefficient is negative. So it reaches a maximum and then it hits the ground. And from time 1 to time 2, all this movement takes 2.06 seconds. Now, there is no part C, but I would like to add part C here. Here it is. In part C, I would like you to determine the maximum height reached by the head. Okay. Can anyone give us a hint how to determine that? So actually, I'm asking about this point. This will be the maximum height. How do I find the maximum height? First of all, what type of function is it? What type of function is it? Good. Does it have a maximum or a minimum? Of course, the leading coefficient is negative. How do I find the maximum? Exactly. That's all I need to do. Let's find the vertex. How do I find the x-coordinate of the vertex? I cannot find the y-coordinate before I find the x. So how do I find the x-coordinate of the vertex? Yes. Negative b over 2a. It's connected to the quadratic formula. Everything except the plus or minus and the square root. So negative. What is b in this function? 30. 2 times a. Negative 32. So this is 30 divided by 32. If I simplify by 2, I get 15 over 16. Okay, whatever that is, 15 over 16, that's the time needed. This is in seconds. It's the time needed for the hat to reach its maximum. But what we are interested in is the maximum height. How do I find the maximum height? I have the time needed for the hat to reach the maximum. But now the question is the maximum height. Exactly. So I have d of 15 over 16. Let's go to the graphing calculator. Put in the function clear, and let's see, what was it? Negative 16 x squared. And what was it? Plus 30, right? Yeah. Plus 30x plus 6. And then with second table, I plug in 15 divided by 16. And I press enter. So after 0.9375 seconds, the hat will reach its maximum height of how many feet? 20.063 feet. So time is 0.9375 seconds. So the hat reaches its maximum height in 0.9375 seconds, and the maximum height is 20.06 feet. Any questions on this problem? Any questions? Are we okay? Good. Let's move on to a inequality. So let's say 37, but I'm changing a few things in there. Let's think about this for a second. Can anyone give us an idea of how to proceed with this? Yes, find the zeros. Find the zeros for each factor. How many factors we see there? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Find the zeros of each factor, and then what would you do with it? In case you are using it, if you like it, please use it. You will put 4 factors. The top has to be the values of x. It has nothing to do with any of the factors other than the fact that x is in the problem. Let me know if you need help. Do we need more time? So what is the zero of the first factor? What is the zero of the second factor? Perfect. What is the zero of the next factor? Perfect. And the zero of the last factor? Do we all agree with 0, -5, 6, and -2? Okay, we need them in ascending order. Which one would you start with first? Which one would you start with? -5 is the first. Correct. 0 and 6. Do you all agree with this? Yes? Okay, then x is the first factor. -x minus 5 is the next one. X minus 6. X plus 2. And I'm going to write product because I don't have enough room to put the entire product there. Good. So the first factor has to have a 0 somewhere under 0. The next factor has to have a 0 somewhere under The next factor has to have a 0 somewhere. Very good. And the last one, under -2. If any of these factors is 0, meaning under -5, -2, 0, and 6, what should the product equal to? Absolutely. If any of the factors is 0, the product must be 0. Do you all agree with this so far? Now, you see that these three will have the same pattern, will follow the same pattern because they have a positive leading coefficient. And a positive leading coefficient looks like this. It's coming from negative values and it's going to positive values. That's all I need to do. So it's negative before it's 0 and then positive afterwards. Negative before it's 0 and positive afterwards. Negative before 0 and positive afterwards. Or you pick a number and you plug it in. However, this one will do this. Will come from positive, will cross the x-axis somewhere, and then will go to negative. So this one is positive before it's 0 and negative in the rest. Now I see I have a lot of subintervals, but in the first one, like in all of them, I only count the negatives. 1, 2, 3. When I multiply 3 negatives, the sign will be. Then I count the negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4. When I multiply 4 negatives, the sign must be. Then I count the negatives again. 1, 2, 3. The sign will be. Then I count the negatives again. 1, 2. The sign will be. Perfect. And the last one I count the negatives. 1 negative. Only now I look here. And now I know what to choose based on this symbol. If the symbol doesn't have the equal symbol, I will have only parentheses. But if it has the equal symbol, then I will have some brackets in there. So, x in the interval. Which sign do I pick? Which sign is less than or equal to 0? Negative. So negative here, negative here, negative here, which means for this x, and for this x. For those x values, the product will be negative, and that's what I need to do, put in the solution. Those intervals that make the product negative because of this symbol. It's less than or equal to. Do we all understand this? Yes? Okay. So then what will I write? X in the interval to -5 with a bracket. Otherwise, I would have, without the equal symbol, I would have left it or put a parenthesis. Union between -2 and 0. And last one, union 6 to infinity. Again, these are brackets because the equal symbol is in the inequality. Any questions? Okay, so let's look at some quadratic in form. Let's start with 24. X to the 4th minus 21, x squared minus 100 equals 0. Let's work on this for a minute. So x to the 4th minus 21 x squared minus 100. If you can factor it without using a substitution, it's fine. It's acceptable. I don't recommend it. Trying to do that. But if you can, it's acceptable and it's perfect. Which letter did you use? You can use anything you want but X. Very good. So therefore, this equation now changes into, yes, yes. Very good. Perfect. So now we are trying to factor the equation in T. Very good. Well done. Are we still thinking about the factor form? Okay. Anyone can give us the factor form or not yet? We want to find, yes. Very good. T minus 25 and T plus 4. Product is negative 100. The sum is negative 21. Perfect. So then we have two solutions for T. But that's not the end of the problem. So what are the solutions for T? Yes? Very good. But now these are two new equations. T equals 25 really means something else. Oops. And T equals negative 4 really means something else. So what does this really mean? T squared equals 25 really means x squared equals 25, right? Because we said T equals x squared. So now this equation is basically x squared equals 25. I should have asked you from the beginning, how many solutions do we have to find? 4, mandatory. Good. So now how do I solve this equation? I have 4 methods. Which one is the best here? Right. But you cannot forget plus or minus. Or you could say, well, the middle term is missing, so I can move 25 and factor. That's fine too. Okay. Yes, Becky, go ahead. Is that okay? You remember you told me that T was x squared? So then this equation is basically x squared equals 25, correct? Okay, what about the second equation? Good. So now I could move 4 to the other side, but I can factor. It's a sum of squares. So this is a better method. So then x equals? Yes, but plus or minus. Indeed. 2i indeed. But plus or minus. We have to have a total of 4. 2 plus 2, total of 4. Should we try another? Okay, very good. Let's say 26. And we have 5 times x plus 3 squared minus 19 times x plus 3 equals 4. I recommend using a substitution, but you can also solve it without. By distributing and squaring, and it's up to you. A substitution is recommended. But since this one doesn't have degree 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth, In case you're using a substitution, you will say let t be what?
X plus 6.
Yes, I agree. And then the new equation becomes
5t squared.
perfect.
Minus 19t.
Yes,
I already moved over to minus 4.
of course,
plus
we
4.
have to do that. Very good, excellent. Thank you. Trinomial, descending order, yes. Greatest common factor, no. Negative leading coefficient, no. Special product, no. 1 is a leading coefficient, no. So our last chance is to find two numbers whose product is and whose sum is. Product is perfect. Sum is very good. Again, because one is positive and one is negative, negative 19, they have to be 19 apart. They should not be close. So, negative 20 and 1. The product is negative 20, the sum is negative 19. So then 5t squared minus 20t plus t minus 4 equals 0. So therefore, what do we factor out from the first two? In parentheses, I need the same thing in parentheses and 0 on the other side. If I omit to write the equal symbol and 0, I will not be solving for anything. So t minus 4. And then I need a factor and a sign. Plus 1. So then the common factor is pulled out, which is t minus 4, and 5t plus 1. And we have two solutions for t. It's good, but it's not good enough. What are those solutions? One is 4, and the other one is very good. So now there are two equations. T equals 4 becomes x plus 3 equals 4. And t equals negative 1/5 becomes x plus 3 equals negative 1/5. The first one is clear. X must be, we subtract 3, 1. And this one is x equals negative 3 minus 1/5, 15 minus 1, or negative 15 minus 1, negative 16/5. And these are the two solutions in x. Any questions? I would like to look at more word problems and graphing. Quadratic functions. Is that okay? Okay. Bless you. So let's look at graphing. One problem is 47 on page 709, which is f of x equals x minus 4 squared minus 4. I changed the 2 into 4. So it's not really 47. Similar. So let's go through 6 steps, 1 minute. First step, shape. Second step, vertex. X and y intercepts, the y-intercept, x and y intercepts, the axis of symmetry, and the max-min. Do you want me to write those down? Okay. So 1, shape. 2, vertex. 3, x-intercepts, if they exist. 4, y-intercept, that will always exist. 5, axis of symmetry. 6, max or min value. So the first one, shape. You don't have to copy them as we go along, or it's up to you. So first one, shape. Second one, the vertex. X-intercepts if they exist. Y-intercept, that will always exist. Axis of symmetry, and then the max min of the function.